Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, it's still morning. Gosh, I am really trying to push these days, and you all can understand why. Welcome to Informer Live. I'm Denise Rolark Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer, host of our weekly broadcast, Let's Talk, on WIN TV every Friday from noon to 1 p.m. But today, Thursday, November the 7th, we wanted to bring you this special broadcast to talk to our reporters and hopefully to you through your comments about our coverage, about the coverage of election 2024. Before we get started, let me just say, like most of you, I was hopeful, more than hopeful. If you watched our broadcast live on Tuesday night from Sankofa Books and Cafe, you know that we were an unbiased journalism organization hoping for the best for Vice President Kamala Harris to become the next president of the United States of America. And as those numbers rolled in, as we saw those results, that hope turned into anxiety, anger, confusion, and disappointment. But here we are. The results are what they are. And now we have to move on. We have to talk about what the next 4 years are going to look like. Not only talk about it, read about it, examine it, prepare for it, defend it. All of those things are what's in store for us. So, when it comes, I have to say this, when it comes to Black people in America, we've been here our entire how many times how long we've been here? They say since 1619, although some debate that number. But there has never been a an unchallenging, comfortable moment for Blacks in this country. And not only Black people, but a lot of folks that live in America. And that's what's so confusing, confounding about this election is that there were so many white women who appeared to want to support the vice president. So many Black men who we thought were going to go for Donald Trump, who actually did go for him. So many Hispanics who we thought would understand that immigration was a big issue that impacted them, who went for Donald Trump. So many groups of people in this country who we thought would look at this election and see that there was an opportunity for change, for hope, all of that. And it just didn't happen. Or maybe it did. We don't know. I mean, we think we know. We've been following the news. We've been listening to this man. Some of us have had a chance to read Project 2025. We know what happened in the last administration. But as Reverend Jesse Jackson always says, keep hope alive. And so maybe that's what folks are doing. Maybe they're hoping that this man has this magic wand and he's going to get rid of all of our problems, who are people, for him, and bring in sort of a new sense of what it means to make America great again. This is a big question mark for so many of us. And you know what? It's going to keep us as journalists extremely busy because we want to be your eyes and your ears to this administration and the impact that this is going to have specifically on the District of Columbia. I mean, nobody, I have friends that call me during the week that said, we're really praying for you all because they thought, we might do what other folks have done. And at the end of the election, act crazy. Well, that didn't happen. And so here we are moving forward. I know that I'm looking at our production team that says, Denise is off topic. We have photos we want to show, and she's talking about something different. But go ahead and put some of those photos up so that we can share what happened on Tuesday night. One, as I said, we were at Sankofa Books and Cafe on Georgia Avenue, 3 blocks up from Howard University. One of the, I guess, one of the historic venues in the city. We talked with the one of the co-owners there, and we'll have some of her comments because, in spite of it all, there's some great things that are going to happen with Sankofa. They're talking about expanding. And so it was so, so good to talk with the folks that own Sankofa. And as I said, we were 3 blocks up from Howard University where folks stood out there probably for a good 5 hours waiting to hear the vice president speak on Tuesday night. Of course, that didn't happen until yesterday. And as customary, um, uh, she gave a fantastic, fantastic um, concession speech. But as she said, she may be conceding the election, but she's not conceding democracy. She's not conceding justice. She's not conceding the fight for all the things that she thinks that we know we cannot concede: democracy, justice, um, equity, all of those issues. We cannot concede that. So true as to form, we're back in battle again, folks. And I hope you all are ready. And for those folks who are really celebrating today, we want we want to be a part of the party too. We want to know what you all have to celebrate. Because maybe we're just not seeing it. Maybe we're being blind. Maybe what we've heard and seen is not reality, or maybe what you have heard and seen is different than what we how we translated it. But at any rate, again, we're going to have members of our Washington Informer team with us over the next hour, and we're going to have a couple of guests. But I am really thrilled first to bring on the former First Lady of the District of Columbia, Cora Masters Berry. I hope she's with us. If she's not, she will be with us shortly because as from where she sits, and I'm looking forward to reading her book, from where she sat during her tenure as First Lady and with the former mayor of Mayor for Life, but former mayor, council member, school board member, um, founder of Pride Incorporated, founder of the Mayor's Leadership Youth Institute, Marion Barry. They saw a lot. And I think the spirit of that era still lives on in this woman who has had her own battles to fight. But, she has continued. And we hope to have had her on Tuesday night, but she's available for us today, I hope. We're waiting to hear from her. But as we move on, I hope that you will check out our website, WashingtonInformer.com. Visit our website. As a matter of fact, while we're waiting, before we move on, if you can visit it now. And there, you'll see all of the stories that we've covered leading up to this election. We are extremely proud of Senator Angela also Brooks. Of course, she doesn't really get sworn in for maybe a month or so, but we are extremely proud of her. We're sending her to the Senate, although the Senate went to the Republicans. We've got what we are expecting to be a forceful voice on behalf of those who sent her there to speak up and speak out. And as a Black woman, we know that she's not going to hold back any punches. So we're very excited about her. And of course, locally, Councilmember Trayon White won re-election to Ward 8. We're sitting on our hands and biting our fingernails to see what's going to happen with him. It's not looking good. But in the meantime, folks might be gearing up to run for this Ward 8 seat. We want to congratulate Mr. Felder from Ward 7. As you know, Council Member Vincent Gray decided not to run for reelection and has decided, due to a diagnosis of early stage Alzheimer's, that he is not even going to be able to vote for the next several weeks before his tenure ends. But the community is, I think, pleased with his replacement, and we look forward to seeing more about him. But as I said, if you go to our website, because I keep going on, if you go to the website, there will be a little box that you'll see there. It'll just pop up on you, and it's a way for you to subscribe to Washington to our Washington Informer daily newsletter. We've got a lot of news we're going to be producing, so we want to make sure you don't miss out on it. All you have to do is insert your email address there, nothing else. There's no cost, and you will become a part of the Washington Informer family. We want to have as many people informed, inspired, educated, motivated. I'm coming up with a lot of adjectives today. I don't know what this means, but at any rate, uh, by reading the Washington Informer. That's the job of our Washington Informer team. And so go ahead and fill that out, put your email address in there, and become a part of the Washington Informer family. On our show today, because I'm still, okay, of course, Mrs. Barry seems to be having some technical issues. So we're going to move on. And once, if we get that straight, we will come back and talk to her. So on our show today, um, which will be led by our managing editor, Mr. Micha Green. Why am I saying Mr. Micha Green? Will be leading our conversation today. And we have with us Jada Ingleton, um, our digital fellow and senior reporter, Stacy Brown. Of course, he's out there still covering news, so he may be in and out of this conversation. And Sam PK Collins, if we can grab him from wherever he might be. And but he's our education and political reporter, as well as Prince George's County reporter Richard Elliott, and who's going to bring us up to date on what happened in Prince George's County and what's next. Because now, as you know, there's an open seat. And so there's going to be a big push for county executive in Prince George's. So, I mean, folks are already in line to fill that position. So I think if we can move on, there's one more thing I wanted to state. Okay, Micha, maybe you're not leading, but we're going to have this conversation. I'm going to bring you on shortly. But before I do that, I just wanted to announce, as I did on the show the other day, that Dr. Ron Walters, and we just don't know how important this is right now, and I hope we have the flyer to put up. We'll be hosting a national town hall meeting on November the 14th here at 6:30 p.m. at the, I can't even read that, but I hope you all can, the historic New York Avenue Presbyterian Church right there at 13 right off of 13th and New York Avenue Northwest. He's bringing on local leaders and others to talk about the 2024 presidential election, progress or disaster. I think it's real important for leaders and community folks to get together to talk about what this election means to us. And for the District of Columbia, there's some real serious issues that we need to talk about. So check that out. That's the website, www.ibw21.org. Dr. Walters will be on with us tomorrow, and we want you to engage in that conversation with us and get some updates on why he's holding this town hall and what he hopes to accomplish as a result of this town hall that will be held on Thursday, November the 14th. All right. Let's get on with the show. Micha, are you there?
I am here.
Good, good. Yeah, I put you on whatever thinking you're going to leave, but we're going to talk together for a little bit because um you know, I've been out here for a little while. You've been out here for a shorter while as a journalist. One, I want you to really talk a little bit about how this election has impacted you. I mean, you've seen some elections, you've covered some during your journalism career, and where do you think we go from here? I don't really want to look back too much, but where do you think we go from here?
Yeah, thank you, Miss Denise. I mean, this has been, as many people have said over the course of this election season, is that it's been a stressful election season. It started with a major concerns about the president and his ability to serve as the Democratic presidential nominee. We saw the debate, which I think definitely created even more buzz and questions and concerns. And then it was a major shift and pivot, not only for the Democratic Party, but for all of us who had plans and for coverage, initially thinking it was a Biden and Trump matchup. And of course, then we had the major shift in the vice president becoming on as the presidential Democratic nominee. And so, I think overall, it has been a season of keep on keeping on, if you will, because I think we can make. I love that we had plans and we had things in place, but we had to make major shifts, and we did so. I think one of the biggest things I learned throughout this entire process is from a journalism perspective is truly looking at the audience and our niche, and in this it's that we have one of the most amazing audiences on earth at being in the nation's capital, aka, I know people will fight me on this later, but it's still Chocolate City in so many ways, and that's our bones. And so reporting on how the district was affected in so many different aspects, whether it was due to stress, whether I was really appreciative of our DMV at the DNC coverage. Richard did a wonderful piece at the end of last week about how Project 2025 would potentially impact district or really DMV residents overall, particularly considering what the Project 2025's plan. Trump has somewhat denied it, but what we know people who are supportive of him are hoping to do regarding policies and potentially moving different government agencies and headquarters that are based here. And so, I've learned a lot. I think that we overall can only sort of go back to that same Kofa idea of reaching back we've known and taking it with us. And so, and building upon that. And so, obviously, we saw some of the challenges that came with January, or excuse me, with November 2016, and following that all the way to January 2017, when there were tons of activations and protests, et cetera, in the city. And so, what I'm doing now is, as managing editor, is really preparing for what's next. We're really excited about being responsible about for telling the story to our amazing Washington Informer audience about the things that people should be looking out for in this coming administration, and then keeping a pulse on what the administration is up to. That's the job of journalists in general, and we won't take that away just because the candidate that the Informer endorsed is not who won. It's still our responsibility to be fearless, bold, courageous journalists, and hold these leaders accountable. And so we plan on doing so. We plan on continuing to tap into the community and hear their concerns and hear their achievements and hear some of the things that we know that's important to them in order to be able to report on it. And I think that's all we can do.
Well, I'm just curious. I said I didn't want to look back, but I do want to a little bit. Were you, and I don't have your resume in front of me, so I forget the past. But are you, and that's not good because we're talking about Sankofa, so we have to look to the past. But
Yeah.
were you actually a working journalist during the previous Trump presidency?
I was. So I was DC editor at the Afro starting in, I believe, January 2018. So still working for a Black owned publication and covering issues here in DC. I started. When Trump first won, I was a freelance journalist. And so I was primarily doing broadcast. And so I was covering a lot of the protests and things like that, as well as I remember covering the women's march and the excitement surrounding that. And I had a couple packages you can go back and look at. I don't know. You could probably Google them on the different websites and places that it aired at the time, but that was what I was up to. And then I became DC editor during his administration. And I think, again, I was really new in my career as an editor as opposed to a reporter. And so I think at the time when I was curating certain things, it felt like, though it was planned, still was reactionary. And part of that is we had not had the experience of a Donald Trump administration before. But boy, was I, baptism by fire, thrown into it. And certainly by January 2021, it was all hands on deck, which was towards obviously the end of the Trump administration. But, one of the major things that we had during that time was a very resistant administration in terms of the press. And so, again, it was talking to the community, talking to the workers who were willing to speak on record, talking to the folks who didn't have the stories that we see in the major headlines and mainstream media, if you will. And so, again, I plan to do that again this time around. And now I've lived as an editor through a Trump presidency, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I think, Misha, when I think back at some of those stories, because that was, the time of COVID. Um, there was some real, and when we bring Stacy Brown on, I want to talk about some of the stories that we focused in on during his prior. Oh, there's Stacy. I wanted to try to get Cora in because I
There
think
he is.
well, they'll let me know when she's ready. And I know you have to. I want to get you in while you can, but you're a seasoned, what they call a seasoned journalist.
Yeah.
Misha
So
got seasoned, and look at her.
I know,
She's
I
been
know.
covering this
I
stuff.
have like just a little bit of like maybe Italian seasoning.
There you go.
I need a full.
I was gonna say a little bit of pepper, but
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, exactly. I only got a little pepper. I need a full pantry like you guys.
Well, we're getting there. But Stacy, I mean, I listened to your show this morning. Boy, whew, anyway, I won't go into how I left, or maybe it did get me fired up. I don't know. But
She
if you
see me.
think
She
back,
laughed. It wasn't meant to be a joke.
uh, if well, if you go back to the former Trump administration,
Yeah.
what are some of the stories that come to mind that we were covering? I know our
Yeah.
contact there was, and I plan to reach out to her, was Omarosa, right?
Oh, that was your contact.
Oh, that's right. Which really, but at any rate, and
But
actually, she was the first to leave.
Right,
yeah, how about that?
right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
But what do you remember?
Well, what I remember is, um, when so today you go to the White House, this administration, you go, unless you are invited, which I was fortunate a couple of times to be invited into the Oval Office. You got to see the president, you got to see the vice president. I was invited into her office once or twice. Um, but in the Trump administration, what was interesting, Denise and Misha, you go to the White House to cover, say, the briefing or whatever, and you might run into President Trump. You might go down a hallway, turn right, they'll tell you or whatever. And Lauren Burke was telling this story too. When you run into President Trump, it was really interesting. And I think a
Were
lot of
you
that
able to
had
talk to him when you saw him?
you wasn't able to interview him, but you
Mm,
were able to speak to him, yes.
okay.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that was, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but it was feeding his ego. This man has a extremely, like most billionaires do, extremely large ego.
Yeah.
And although he had press secretaries, we know he had quite a few press secretaries. Donald Trump preferred to speak for Donald Trump. And even against his administration's wishes, we know he was tweeting. They didn't want him tweeting. Um, he would roam the White House, the West Wing, and then go across to the old government building. You would find Donald Trump somewhere in the like he was, like, you go to Denise's house and you go to the backyard and you'll find Lafayette. You know, so um, so that was one interesting thing. The other thing was you got it at least okay, let's speak for myself. I got the distinct impression, and a lot of people talked about this later, but early on, I got the distinct impression that this was a guy who only became president because, not because he wanted to be president, but he wanted to prove he could win. And being president had no interest in the everyday duties of being the president.
But the highlights, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think he's shocked. I think he's still shocked. I mean, that was
Yeah,
one of the statements
exactly.
he made
Mhm.
today. Can you believe this? I mean,
Exactly.
he just seemed as shocked as as many of us were that he won, and he won um, in such big numbers, so wide, and it's no discredit to anything that Kamala Harris did.
So what's
We know,
interesting, Denise, when you talk about the numbers, he got less votes this time than he did in 2020,
okay.
right? But she got far less votes than she and Biden got in 2020.
Right.
There's we are built on conspiracy theories. People are looking for 20 million. Where's the other 20 million people who voted in 2020? And so you have that issue. But the numbers are astonishing in that while we sit here and we say which is factual that white women, certainly white men, got him elected this time, and black people did what they normally do. There was no big, uh, jump towards Trump from black men. Black men need to stop being blamed for that. Latino men were the culprits. But eh, he um, he's not as popular as he was in 2020 yet. He was able to do something that most Republicans don't do and win the popular vote.
Well, I mean, I've assessed this to be purely, besides racist and sexist, definitely an economic issue.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt, I can't, I mean, maybe somebody else can, but it's no doubt you can see it, how people are struggling
Mhm.
and what he's going to do to make things better. And as I think about here in the District of Columbia, when we're talking about government agencies, this is a government town. Kids are raised not as much as they were, but they were raised. You grow up and you get a good government job. That day looks like it's coming to an end. Um, I just don't know how he's going to fix that and make it better for people.
Yeah.
But,
So to
he
the
won.
Misha's point though about the Informer being well positioned, perhaps better than any other newspaper in the country because of the because we are there in DC and because we're very trusted in DC anyway, number one. But the location and the perspectives, a
Yeah.
lot of things are going to be happening there in DC with things that you just described. The former president, the president elect now has said we changing the civil service, and we know that affects a whole lot of DC residents.
No question. And what is being reported here locally, Stacy, is that the District of Columbia, and especially Mayor Muriel Bowser, is at least was, and he said it more than once. She's in his bullseye,
Yeah.
and we've been. That's another reason why I was hoping we might be able to get Cora Barry on the call because she had some experience, as we all did, under a control board and basically how we got there and how we got out, and that we fought really hard to stay out, even though we still. I mean, as I look at this election, and I get so disappointed because I hate to say DC just doesn't count, but we bear the brunt of think about it. When we do a Fourth of July event, we don't, but the National Park Service does a Fourth of July event every year on the grounds of the Washington Monument. But who decided, or he decided, that he wanted to hold his own event with planes and trucks? And I mean, on the same night, didn't have the turnout, but cost the district a lot of money,
Yeah.
a lot of money. Because, like you said, he's Donald Trump. And so, I mean, we're going to have a council and a mayor that's going to have to resist and fight for the rights of the district. under this president, unless, well, I can't say unless, because we know what his plans are. And these people that have been, and I get it, the crime rate has gone down, but in his mind it hasn't. And so what he's thinking about pulling in the National Guard,
Right.
are folks really going to be happy about that? We'll see.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I just sometimes look back, and it's strange how we forget. That's why Sankofa is so important. That
Mm.
symbol, that bookstore is so important, because we fail to look back at the history of what got us here and how we got through it. We know we got through it, but we don't know what we got through because we don't pay attention. And so we allow history to repeat itself, and we can't let that happen.
Well, you have the problem with what you're facing now, certainly more than you did in 2020, is that in this case, you got a guy who is um, bent on revenge, bent on retribution. He's got full control of the Supreme Court, which has always been dangerous, and he's got full control of the Senate. And it looks like there is a great chance that he'll have full control of the U.S. House, and then the fourth estate, his feelings on the media and his plans for the media. One of his spokespersons has come out and said that they are going to look into whether they're going to seize assets from the media, seize from reporters, their notes, their recordings, and other things. They want to be able to make it a state-run media type situation. So when people say, "Oh, he can't do this or he can't do that," everything that the problem is, Denise and Misha, everything that they've said that he can't do, he has been able to do.
Looks like he's trying to emulate those, what he calls those s-hole countries in Africa, where journalists are struggling over there.
Yeah.
The government controls the media,
Yeah.
so he wants to be like them, although he wants to disrespect them. I want to bring on Cora Berry, Stacy, if you can stay on, and Misha, as well as Ramon Bain, who Ramon, Stacy, because she's did a lot of work with Michael Jackson. And Ramon, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, everybody. Stacy, it's been a
Hi.
while. Great seeing you. Hi, Misha. And I have Mrs.
Hello.
Barry on the phone. We are trying to make this happen the best way
Oh,
we
okay.
can.
So we're going to hear her voice, not see her.
You're going to hear her voice, but not see her. Yeah, we
Okay.
weren't able to get technically together.
Yeah. Okay.
You know
We
what?
understand.
I'm sorry. I'm just gonna throw this in the back, Jamon. If we can get a photo of Mrs. Barry when she's speaking to come up, that would be great. Just for the technicalities, if we can pull that up.
That's what that broadcast journalism does for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Ramon, first of all, your reaction. What I know you have, you're the PR guru for everybody. You're working on behalf. Nobody sees you, the hot behind the scenes person. But I'm sure you have some reaction to Tuesday night.
Well, I'm very disappointed, and I'm also surprised because I've seen a lot of the numbers. And it just seems as if to me there was a breakdown in mobilization. Now, whose fault that is, whether it's the campaigns or the Democratic Party, but in looking at the breakdown of the numbers, I would think that those who voted, the numbers would have been much larger. And as you know, our former mayor, Marion Barry, with Cora Berry as his advisor, had the key with regards to getting people to the polls. And it appears to me that that was the breakdown. Because when I look at the numbers, that she got 92% of Black women's vote, but only 7% of Black women who were registered voted. Same with Black men. It seems to me, at the numbers I've seen, the recent numbers I've seen, 5% of all African American men who were registered to vote voted, and she got 78% of the 5%. Now, with the campaign having raised as much money as they did, I'm a little disappointed that the mobilization end of that seemed to have fallen through the cracks. And I think that's probably the Democratic Party should have spent a little bit more time with their mobilization campaign. And I'm very disappointed in that, in looking at the numbers.
Yeah,
Interesting, Denise.
go ahead.
I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Stacy.
What's interesting, what Ramon is just saying is, I saw a report, maybe Ramon knows about this as well, that a lot of the money that was supposed to go to certain um, organizers and organizing organizations campaigning for her never left the DNC or the campaign, or was recycled back into certain consultants who didn't use the money. So that what she's saying seems to match up with that story I saw.
But there were thousands. I mean, there were busloads of people we know that went to Pennsylvania. Now, maybe they didn't go to all of the right places in Pennsylvania, but every weekend there were anywhere from, 2 to 3 to 5 to, 5 at a time, 5 busloads of folks going out to GOTV efforts in Pennsylvania. I don't know about North Carolina. Don't think we really had to do much in Virginia. Um, but yeah, you
That's
know,
but that's outreach, and they did a brilliant job. But on the day of the election, it
hmm
seems there was a breakdown with regards to mobilization, getting them to the polls.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Recruiting and getting them to register is one thing, and they did a brilliant job in that. They registered hundreds of thousands of people. But on the day of the election, there was a breakdown in getting people to the polls, the mobilization. And Cora Berry can speak more to that than I, because she's the queen of that. But my perspective, that's one of the areas that it appears we fell short in,
Well,
and caused us not to be able to neutralize the numbers of Democratic women who again defected over to Trump, and men who voted for Trump. Had we had more people going to the polls through mobilization, I think we would have been able to neutralize that a little bit more.
a great point. I want to bring in Cora if we can, Ramon, Mrs. Barry, if we can bring
She's
her
here.
in. Ms. Barry, you there?
Absolutely, I'm here. How's everyone?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just great. I'm very excited over the victory of Angela Alsabrook's. I've spent a lot of time and energy in that journey, and then the city. I'm sorry, the state and the country will benefit because she's a unique, powerful young woman who has really broken a lot of barriers, slayed 2 dragons, and is now prepared to go to the Senate that is hostile territory, but she's ready. So
Oh, yeah.
and then initially and continue to be and helping get her there.
So you, Mrs. Barry, were part of a group of women who met on, was it Sunday nights? Thousands across the country.
Women.
Say that again?
Win with Black Women, founded
Right.
by Joteka Eddy.
Right. Talk about, how that evolved. I know you all been meeting anyway, but what was the mission of this group as it related to the election of Kamala Harris?
Well, it didn't originate there. It originated, well, really around this election, during the period of time when Biden was trying to decide who he would put on as a vice president candidate. He had said to the country clearly and directly that he was going to have a woman as his vice president and a Black woman he was going to put on the Supreme Court. As time went by, many of us felt, well, how come we can't have both? So there was a young woman named Joteka Eddy,
Mhm.
who went around and talked to Mignon Moore and other people. And they said, well, why don't we start some kind of movement to put the pressure on? So, to make a long story short, she started an organization, we all did at the beginning, called Women with Black Women, up to 300 women on, and putting pressure, writing letters and advocating and lobbying for a Black woman to be his running mate. And then there were, several options out there that we could have chosen from. But at the end of the day, the men wanted to join us, and we said, well, rather than join us, why don't you start your own organization? So they put together an organization, a group that said, we want a Black woman on the ticket. And they even went further than us, because they said, if you don't put a Black woman on the ticket, we won't support you. So with that kind of pressure, President Biden bowed to it and selected Kamala as his vice president. And the moment he made the selection that evening, she was on the phone with us. As a matter of fact, she was on the phone with us the Sunday before the election also. But from that, the group grew. We supported women who were running for office all over the country, Black women specifically, and had calls every 8:30 to 10, and really sometimes it would go to midnight depending upon how many people were on. And we had people who joined us, an average 2, 3, 4, 500 people every week from all over the country. And again, back to Angela Alsabrook's, one of her first introductions in terms of a national introduction was when she got on the call with Women with Black Women, and we introduced her as the woman in Maryland who's going to take a run at the Senate, and that was very encouraging and very valuable to her campaign. And we did it with many others, and of course, the star of all of that would have been and was Kamala, her election. And that night, when the president deferred to her and stepped down from running for president and gave that nod to Kamala, we had a big call on that night. It started out with a regular, and it ended up with, I think, 44,000 people. And we raised over $1 million that night. And from that, other organizations spun off. White women for Kamala, white dudes for Kamala, gays, and all that. But all of that, is what happened. So at some point, it kind of climaxed with an event that I don't know if you're familiar with this, and that Oprah had, where Joe Baker was there, and then the people who led these various super Zoom calls for Kamala were in the audience, and they talked about what they did. And Oprah introduced the celebrities, and it all came out of Women with Black Women. So we are still in existence. I assume that we'll have quite a call this Sunday coming up.
I'm sure you will. I said, I'm sure you will.
Yeah. But back to my original statement, of course, one of the people that was, again, instrumental in that call was Angela. And they were very supportive and raised a lot of money for her.
Well, I think I'm glad that at least the night ended with a celebration on your part. I mean, because there were a lot of folks that, like you said, she ran into some competition early on in that race, talking about Angela Alsabrook, but I think was able to turn that around with the support of the women that supported her. I mean, when you all come out, you come out in full force. And it's good that you're focusing on what do you call it? The down, what's the word? Down ballot candidates, because that's where it makes a real difference. Micha, Stacy, you got a question or anything for Mrs. Barry?
Well, Mrs.
Go ahead, Micha. I'm sorry.
Sorry, just one of the things that I think about when I think about a changing administration in the district is how a little bit of the landscape of the district changes, and the people who are here, the demographic is different, and we even remember that shift in 2016. And so, and of course that was my first presidential election as a journalist, and so I was covering it from that. But I'm interested in, as somebody who's been instrumental to the community for so long and has seen presidential administrations change over time, what is the story that we're supposed to tell and the pulse that you hope we as the Black press have on the community as we sort of see these shifts here in the district?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
You said, what was the question? What is the shift?
What is the pulse that you hope that we have as we see these shifts here in the Black community, here in the district?
Well, let me just say that the status of the District of Columbia under the administration that's coming in, it's in discussion. There's some concerns that the former president, will come in and activate his list of grievances against the District of Columbia. Could make life very difficult for us. But beyond that kind of a power play, I think that the city it has a very positive outlook. We just elected a senator from Maryland, but one of the things that's important for us, especially in our present condition with our non-voting delegate, is that we have representation, strong representation on Capitol Hill. And as Angela said, when she campaigns across the country, but especially in the DMV, is that she not only will be representing Maryland, but she will be representing the District of Columbia. Mm-hmm. And whatever our concerns are, we have a voice and a friend on Capitol Hill on the Senate side that will be fighting for and looking out for our interests. So that's good news for us because we've never had that before.
Thank you.
May I say something to you, Micha, Stacy, and Denise? This was a very historic campaign, and there were Black women, all of whom Mrs. Berry and I know very well. Mignon Moore, Donna Brazil, Bishop Leah Daughtry, Yolanda Caraway. Black women who had an absolute, unequivocal way by which they handled the politics. The convention was one of the best I've ever viewed. They were all inclusive. Kamala Harris ran a brilliant campaign. She left no stone unturned. She had 3 months, and I think it was one of the best run campaigns I've ever witnessed in the years that I've been here in DC and working with the various elections and presidential candidates. But, we want to take our hats off to Mignon Moore and Jateka, Edie, and others who were on the ground and did a fabulous job. And it was a historical event. And I will never forget that as a Black woman and someone who's here in DC and have been a part of campaigns since Jimmy Carter. Those women did a brilliant job, and I think we need to applaud what they did. And I'm hoping moving forward that the level of Black women will be the same moving forward as it was this time. They are to be congratulated.
Thank you.
Ramon and either you or Miss Masters, what, if anything, can the president do right now to help prepare us? Is there an executive action? Is there something at his disposal that he can do to kind of ease a little bit as to what's coming?
Well, there's nothing that I'm a political science professor and taught it for 22 years. And one of my favorite topics, although I taught many different classes, was American government, because I was very clear that we have an electorate in this country, especially Black people, who do not understand the government, how it functions. It doesn't understand the levels. They don't understand the balance of power, the separation of powers, all of that. And in doing that, you then understand clearly what our options are. So I'm saying all that to say there's nothing that President Biden can do for the District of Columbia that Donald Trump can't undo.
I know we have to wrap, but Mrs. Berry and Ramon, do you have a call to action for us and for the folks?
Well, I'll take that question. When you say for us, you talking about us as a people or us as a city?
Us as, why don't you give us both? I was talking as a people, but please as a city.
Definitely as a city.
Yeah, let's start as a city.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed in this last election that we just let happen, it was outside forces. Let's take Proposition 83. We did no lobbying. We did no advocacy against it. It was funded by progressives outside of the District of Columbia. It's headed by Jamie Raskin, who, by the way, does not have that kind of voting, ranked choice voting in Maryland. So what we can do is become more educated and have more understanding of how our government works. We really have to pay attention. We have to read. I mean, we've had some serious situations in the city that I'm watching the response of the public to it, and it's called a lack of education. So what I think we should do is be more involved, more accountable, and more aware of what's going on, not only just in our city, but in our country, so that when we are mobilized to fight back or to advocate or support something or fight against it, then we'll have a working understanding, the knowledge of it, and have the power and the strength and the fortitude and the consistency to make a difference. And I feel very sad that much of what I see, not just in this city, but in this country, we have a very uneducated electorate. And it's really difficult to work with and advocate and vote when you don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I watched it all across the country, and as many people in many situations to blame for Kamala's loss, but one of them was certainly people don't read, they don't pay attention, they don't understand. And so I just think we need to be more invested in our young people, make them understand what's going on in government. We're having, and I'll just take this as a moment to do a little ad, on the 23rd of November, and exactly 10 years to the day and the date that Marion died, my husband Marion, we're unveiling a mural of his accomplishments inside the Marion Barry building. And it's not just about him, but the 40 years of service. You know, everything from summer job programs to minority business, all of that is educational. I'm advocating taking that, turning it into a curriculum and having it put in the school system for middle schoolers to learn something about not just Marion Barry, but the city. So we have to work harder to educate our young people about our government and their role in it.
All I can say to that is preach, Mrs. Barry. You are so correct, and we've got to take that on ourselves, because it's not happening in the classrooms, and we're not doing it out here in the community. And I was going to say, the Washington Informer could be a tool until you said they don't read, and I'm like, oh, because you're right, they don't. So a lot of folks don't, but we keep putting it out there. But I want to thank you, and thank you, Ramon, for being with us, for sharing this great information. I mean, we'll be rebroadcasting this broadcast, but what you've offered today, I think, has been critical for folks to hear.
Well, thanks to you, Denise, Stacy, and Micha. Thanks for everything you all do and always being there for us and for the community. Thank you.
All righty.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day. So we're going to move on. I think Sam P.K. Collins is on and talking about elections and what happens locally. Sam, you got a couple minutes. Wanted to squeeze you in because the last time we talked to you Tuesday night, you were at Georgina's on Georgia Avenue with some great food, some good old soul music, and the watch party for Councilmember Trayon White. Bring us up to date on DC politics.
Right. So I was on MLK Avenue on Tuesday night, not too long after I had spoken to you and Micha. Councilmember Trayon White walked into the space. There's a picture right there with Freya Moore to the left of him, or to the left of the brother in the center. She was part of an ANC candidates. She and two of those other slate members won election. So Freya Moore is an ANC commissioner in the Anacostia area, and Jamila White, as well as Robin McKinney, they won their seats as well. And Councilmember Trayon White was reelected with 76% of the vote. This is very, very significant just given the fact that right now um, he's facing a federal bribery charge, and there were questions about what that would bode for his political future. It seems that the votes were in alignment with what Ward 8 or the Ward 8 establishment wanted, as far as keeping a Democrat in office and letting the council and federal courts do its thing as far as Councilmember White's future. But as I explained in my article, Tuesday night was really a tug of war between the DC Democratic establishment and those who want to be involved in it. So we saw the passage of Initiative 83, which Mrs. Core Masters Berry talked about quite a bit. Even though it passed with 70+% of the vote, there's still a question of whether funds will get appropriated. And it appears that neither Mayor Bowser nor Council Chairman Phil Mendelson are enthusiastic about funding Initiative 83. So we're looking at ongoing court challenges. We're looking at the possibility of Make All Votes Count DC suing for the implementation of Initiative 83. But folks who I spoke to on the ground, those who were against it, really spoke about what they saw as the exclusion and marginalization of the Black native DC population. And they said that the same people who supported Initiative 83 were the very ones who infiltrate DC politics through the advisory neighborhood commissions. So as y'all know, the advisory neighborhood commissions are the most hyper-local form of representative government in DC. And those of us who've been here our whole lives, we've seen the demographic changes in DC take shape through the ANCs. When the transients, when they get elected into office and they start organizing around issues that they find important, but the native Washingtonians might not. And oftentimes that's when things get lost in translation. So Initiative 83 is further highlighting that schism between native Washingtonians and between transients. People who I spoke to in support of Initiative 83, a good amount of them, truth be told, had not been living in DC for more than 10 years, more than 15 years. So, that speaks to the concern that the opponents have about Initiative 83's funding. Now, as far as those who support it, many of them spoke about being activists, being organizers in the Wilson building, and really trying their best as the DC Council and Mayor Bowser continues to support what they call very punitive criminal justice measures, and they support anti policies that are against the housing insecure. So people are very up in arms about that, and they see Initiative 83 as being a means of expanding representation in DC, and making sure that those who are elected in the office are elected by more than 50% of the electorate, not just 40% or even 11%, as has been the case in citywide races with a whole bunch of candidates.
Sam, you raised some questions, and I'm so glad Mrs. Berry said the things that she said about, education when it comes to politics and government. But when you talk about people that haven't lived here for 10 or 15, more than 10 or 15 years, I mean, if we go back to the early folks in the district who became leaders in this city, they hadn't been here that long either. They came in and saw a city that was run, as my daddy did. He wrote one of his columns back in the day, DC run by suburban white folks, because they didn't even live in the city, right? That was a law that the city council passed. In order to hold certain positions, you had to, in the district government, you had to be a DC resident. So, this reality of people that come to the city and get engaged in politics within a short period of time is sort of the reality of the city. And when it comes to the ANC seats, which is, I guess it's been sort of a challenge. Maybe you can talk more about that. But if you look at ballots across the city, most of them only have one person that's running for a seat. You don't really have a choice. So, there's a lot of education and activism that needs to be done in between now and the next election and ongoing, because people are just not as Mrs. Berry said, reading or paying attention.
Without question. And, as far as the ANC seats are concerned, we just celebrated 50 years of home rule not too long ago, and the ANCs came out of that. To your point about the one candidate for most of these ANC seats, the positions are unpaid, and those who have been in the ANC position, sometimes from what they've told me, the work of an ANC commissioner is much more than their day job. So it requires always being communicative. It requires reaching out to agencies, conducting meetings, balancing books, things of that nature. So folks may not be too enthusiastic about what the work entails. And even more importantly, Councilmember Trayon White spoke to this. On election night Tuesday, people were just as concerned about the local races as they were. Well, they were just as concerned about the national ticket just as much, or if not more concerned than they were with the local tickets. So people may not be, to your point about education, might not be too enthusiastic or aware of what they need to do as an ANC for their 2,000 constituents,
Sounds like another story for the Washington Informer. Did Councilmember Barry speak? I'm sorry, White, Councilmember White, did he speak?
He spoke to people individually. He walked around the room. He gave confidants hugs. He did speak to the Informer beforehand. He had predicted this victory. He said that the people understood his power, that they came out. From what he told me, he said that the people said they were going to support him just as he had supported them in the past. And he referenced his 20 plus years of service as an activist and then as an elected official as reason enough to vote him back into office. I did attempt to get questions in there about the federal bribery charge and reasons as to why he hasn't quite addressed that, but he said he wanted the courts and the DC Council to make their decision and to let the process unfold as it.
So that sounds like he's not going to resign.
No, he's not resigning. No, not from what I saw.
Okay. All right. And what about Ward 7?
Ward 7. Wow. So Wendell Felder, the Democratic nominee, of course, he won. He is now the council member elect and council member Vincent C. Gray's successor. The more interesting race was the Ward 7 State Board race. And that was sort of like a proxy war in the sense that Wendell Felder's primary opponent, Ebony Rose Thompson, she was up for re-election, and there have been efforts in past weeks to coalesce support around her opponent, Tony Kreiner. So Wendell Felder had endorsed Tony Kreiner, a former candidate, Charles Boston, supported Tony Kreiner. A lot of people came out in support of Tony Kreiner to the point where she had accumulated about 20% or so of the vote. So although Representative Ebony Rose Thompson won re-election, she won with 70% of the vote, which to some extent speaks to her experience and her rapport in the community and among the institutional leaders. But at the same time, it does leave some room for her to think about how to appeal to those 20% or what changes, if any, to make. But that was one of the more explosive elections. One more point I do want to bring up as it relates to elections. This was a sleeper, the one that only the Washington Informer caught. But in Ward 4, Fraser O'Leary lost his seat to Dr. T. Michelle Colson. Dr. T. Michelle Colson, she is a DCPS dean, and she ran against O'Leary, who won a special election in 2018, ran again in 2024, full term unopposed, right? So he got 6 years under his belt, only to lose again to a woman who was relatively unknown. And, so there's questions about, what was the cause of that? My understanding is that Democrats for Education Reform, they threw their hat or their support behind T. Michelle Colson because of their anti-union pro-mayoral control views. And T. Michelle Colson supports mayoral control of schools, whereas Mr. O'Leary does not. And he is very pro-union, one of the more active retiree members of the Washington Teachers Union. So something definitely to watch out for, and something I plan on reporting about in the coming days and weeks.
Wonderful, Sam. That's I know we could go on with more because you covered so much
Oh
more.
my goodness. Yeah.
But you said you had a hard stop at 12:15 and it's 12:20, so I don't
Uh-oh.
want you to miss that big interview you. I heard you say uh-oh. So, but we want to thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and shout out to the Informer, always on the post, always representing the people. Love
All
y'all.
right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Likewise.
you. Take care.
So, Stacy and Micha, we want to bring on uh, Richard, Richard Elliott, who covered Prince George's County, and I think we'll squeeze in Jada as well to get her in here. But Richard, whoo, are you? I know on Tuesday night you seemed very excited. Personally, this was not an unbiased program that we did on Tuesday. Our favorites showed, like, the complexion on our faces. And so let's talk about this Angela also books race and whatever else. But really, to be honest, going forward, I'm kind of curious now about this county executive seat.
Okay. So thank you for having me again. Good morning. You all have done an exceptional job in covering this. In spite of what role a lot of people around the country might feel about how media is covered, I think we've done an exceptional job through the race from the primaries up to now. Angela Alsobrooks won along with Lisa Blunt Rochester in Delaware. So now there will be two, not one, but two Black women going to serve in the United States Senate. That's Angela on stage, proud and happy. One of the candidates who might be running for office is in this picture with the Team Maryland sign on the team. Yeah, that's Ryan Middleton, who will be likely running in a special election to replace Jolene Ivey, who has already announced at least intentions to seek the county executive seat. Calvin Hawkins has expressed interest in running for the seat, as has Aisha Braveboy, the state's attorney. And former county executive Rashawn Baker is rumored to be interested as well.
Wow.
So there's several candidates considering running for the county. That's an amazing picture by Anthony, who did an incredible job getting.
Photographer Anthony Tillman. Let's give him a shout out. And her daughter looks just like her.
Oh my goodness.
I gotta say that.
Yep. So look at that. The smile's the exact same. That's
exactly
same smile. I was looking at that literally. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What else could we say? I spent a considerable time.
Well, when is the special election?
So
they're giving it a date.
So there's two possible situations. One of them is a special election if she leaves before December the 2nd. On December the 3rd, they pick a new council chair, a new council vice chair. If she leaves after December the 2nd, the council chair automatically becomes the county executive if there is a tie. And it is likely there will be a tie, as there are 10 members on the council, not 11.
Okay. Thanks. That's good. Well, you got to read the Informer to find out what's happening and when it's time to go back out there and vote again. But go ahead, Richard.
Additionally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the implications for Project 2025. I talked with, I'll just say, somebody who have influence in what the next county government will look like, to go over some of the details yesterday. And some of the things we're facing, and I don't mean to scare anybody that's listening or ruin your day, but some of the things we're potentially facing in Maryland include West Virginia National Guardsmen operating mass deportation camps on day one. For many people who came out to say Project 2025 isn't Trump's plan, Republican leaders have already come out, a day after the election to say we lied. That's actually a several hundred-page plan that says what we're going to do. The ending of the Department of Education, which of course would disproportionately impact Maryland, where in Prince George's, something like 1 in 7 workers work for the federal government. Even if you don't work for the federal government or your federal government job is safe, the IMPS collections will put your taxes higher, or will force mass gentrification in our communities, as people who have very valuable homes but no longer have high-paying jobs are forced to move or are forced to find private sector jobs that, to be blunt, do not exist in the volume that we're talking about. The National Institutes of Health, which is headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland, And Stacy, I'm sorry, you got to talk to that guy who's already talking about removing fluoride from the water, and vaccine skepticism will have leading sway over that agency. We have not even yet gotten to the political loyalty tests, where it is about your commitment to ideology, not your dedication to improving the lives of the American people. These policies are a direct attack on the budget and security of our communities at large. Many, many people are unaware of the impact they will have, whether they were a Trump voter or a Harris voter, for how it could impact them. And I have a final note before I let Jada talk, and these are just my reflections based on data I have seen. The polling ballot questions in Missouri, in Florida, in Nevada, in Arizona got above 50% for progressive policies. In Florida, 57% of people supported legalizing abortion. In Missouri, they raised the minimum wage, and I think they codified abortion. In Nevada, they removed the diaper sales tax, and they codified abortion. At the same time, these same voters voted down the party doing that. Abortion voters, people who think abortion should be legal in most cases, split 50-50 for Trump. Voters for whom democracy was their key issue swung about a third for Trump. In my honest opinion, and this is just my opinion, which we will hash over the coming weeks, months, years, decades, is that in this election, like around much of the world, people have said that unemployment and government services don't matter. Inflation sucks. That is how I have taken it. And what is saddest to me, and I will end with this because it's something I've said to dozens of people in the past day. In Germany in the 1930s, 9,000 something percent inflation, money where people were playing with it, burning it, got the Nazis to the number 2 party. They didn't even get majoritarian power. In America, 20% inflation makes people flip to give that party majority power. That's what I'll end on.
You know, Richard, someone told me I must have really been bored because I spent Saturday binge watching the Netflix film called Hitler. Eerie.
I got an additional note. Somebody called Trump America's next Hitler. Guess who it was? His vice presidential candidate.
Wow. Stacy, you want to weigh in on that, and then we bring in Jada?
Well, I mean, look, here's what I'll say this. Richard, Jada, Denise, you are doing it right. It is a pattern that every Black-owned newspaper should follow, the young ones. And you see how intelligent and on point Richard is. And I know Jada's the same way. This is how you respond. When I mentioned in the meeting earlier today about plans, congratulations, Denise. This is how you plan. To get the young ones passionately involved, and look at our future, Jada, Richard. That's how I respond to that. None brighter.
You're under the gun, Jada. You're the spotlight is on you. Micha, you want to
Well, I mean, just
you
the
have a
one thing
question
that
for
I
her?
really admire about Richard, I also want to just say before I move to Jada, because I think it goes back to what Mrs. Berry was saying earlier, is people reading, people knowing everything that happens with their government. And what I love about Richard is that he not only knows what's happening with his government currently, but he knows the history. And then he just talked about 1930s Germany and completely wowed me over here. So I just think that it's really important, not just for our young people, but for us all to be really, really well informed about what's happening in our government and to push it in such a way that it's unapologetic. You know, I have to say this because Richard was the person who covered it, but as for our Washingtonians in particular, as much as people knew about the ins and outs of that and pizza debacle, which was truly a debacle and was very problematic, they need to know about the ins and outs of our government, because that's also truly a debacle and can be problematic if we don't know what's happening and what's coming our way. So that's my little speech for today. But I will say, Jada, thank you for everything you've done. I know you've been running around the city crazy and doing really, really wonderful work. My question to you is, what would you say? And sorry, and for those that don't know, Jada tag teamed with Stacy on our election night coverage, as well as uh, uh, Vice President Harris's concession speech yesterday. And so you've seen the energy at Howard, and of course, again, the shift, which you talk about in the story. But I'm interested in what's next for the Howard community in particular. There was so much fervor and folks really being politically active. We had wonderful students who knew everything there was to know on Tuesday about the election. But now what's next for Howard?
Well, thank you, Micha. And I do want to point out it was an honor to be collaborating with the Stacy M. Brown. Stacy is so on point with his stories. And literally when we were covering the concession speech, like I had just got on the street in front of Chipotle and Subway. And Micha was like, yeah, Stacy just sent over this, and that. And I was like, okay, I keep on it. So it was great to be working with Stacy and just in general doing my part with election coverage this past week. And kind of, echoing some of the things that were just mentioned between, Richard and Stacy about the youth's involvement, particularly in this election. Howard's community is very, very engaged. And I don't even think it's just because, the Democratic candidate was an alum. It really was about knowing all of these things that are on the ballot and how it's going to directly impact not just the Black community, but Black youth. And, that did start with the Biden-Harris administration with, the student loan push. So I think it's kind of been not so much a wake-up call for them, because I think there was a little bit of that in the back of our heads, reality, like, okay, we still know the country we live in. I was the same way as you, Micha, very optimistic, hoping for change. When the results came out, it was like, okay, disappointing, but that unfortunately makes sense for, the times that we live in. So, to answer your question, I think one thing that I heard the most throughout my time when I went both yesterday and Tuesday night is that people are hopeful, disappointed. It was a lot of emotions between crying, people vocalizing, even anger about what they were seeing as the calls were coming in on Tuesday. But a lot of the students are saying, and that's also something President Harris was saying in her speech, that it's not a time to throw up your hands, but to roll up your sleeves. So I think people see this, if there is some reality check, it's that, we really need to work now to get some of these issues, some of these policies, bring awareness to some of the systematic racism that's been going on for years, but seems to be with some of these new initiatives with this administration kind of, either recurring or getting worse, or just honestly putting the fear in people. So I think what's next for Howard is they're going to keep trying to push as much of Harris's campaign agenda, do what they can in part with, what Harris's team will continue doing, what Biden is going to do with his last few months, and just hoping that somehow, some way we can still have an effect change in the Black community.
Now, Jada, I know you've been really keeping a pulse on the importance of HBCUs, particularly after the end of affirmative action as ruled by the Supreme Court of the United States. And you did a great story about Howard's huge freshman class post the affirmative action decision. I'm curious, as we look at this administration, what should we be looking out for when it comes to HBCUs? And this might also be a Stacy question as well, because you both have been really covering that.
Well, I would hope that in a way, honestly, with Kamala winning, it would have been great for HBCUs, bringing that attention to them, spotlighting the good that the educational value and culture is over there. I would just hope that, affirmative action doesn't take away from people actually understanding and responding to the attacks and the pushback that we're seeing against DEI and anything that's related to Black-centered initiatives. And it's really hard to really know what will come of this. And a lot of the stuff that we will see happen is still going to have to wait a few years. Even though affirmative action was overruled in 2023, we don't really see the long-term effects now going into 2025 yet. It might be another election. It might take another school year to really see how it's, affecting the communities widely. But I think it is better a Stacy question. What do you think, Stacy?
Well, I think that it is reason to be concerned for HBCUs who've struggled. We know that the Biden-Harris administration has provided record funding for HBCUs, record funding opportunities that it's going to go away based on, and Richard mentioned Project 2025, based on the mandate that this incoming administration carries. Um, HBCUs are no different than their vision, for them anyway, their vision of banning certain books, banning certain entities. I talked this morning on our program about that that we wrote about in the Informer, the Colonial Williamsburg, that school there.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
you're going to see, yeah, monuments like that disappear. You're going to see the Confederate monuments return now. And I say all that to say HBCUs are not going to be a priority in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I dare say that the priority when it comes to HBCUs from this administration will be to try and dismantle them. And so my hope for HBCUs, Howard and everyone else, is that they too have planned this out accordingly. Um, I mentioned Spelman calling this emergency almost summit with students and faculty. I'm noticing now this is not HBCU, but this is my point. Gavin Newsom just called a special legislative session, and he wants everyone there so that California can be prepared legally to defend himself against any attacks by the Trump administration. So these are the things that HBCUs need to do. I foresee that happening because the one thing about HBCUs, we know how resilient they are. We know how determined they are as well. They have to be prepared for not only the lack of funding, the reversal of some government funds. Um, Obviously, student loan debt is not going to happen. Erasing student loan debt is not going to happen, and it's going to be a concerted effort to destroy these amazing institutions.
It brings me back to a point that Richard made when he talked about Project um, uh,
2025.
thank you, 2025. I'm trying to forget it already. Um, but we can't. I know I've taken a little dive into that document, not a deep dive, but because it is the blueprint for which we believe will be followed by the Trump administration. And you're talking about Stacy being prepared, right? The preparation comes from reading and knowing what that document contains. So,
Right.
you talk about that a little bit, whatever you were wanted to say, maybe related to the HBCUs. I know you have to jump off, so I want you to
Mhm.
get in with your last comments. But I'm trying to figure out how the Washington Informer can be that amplifier of a warning document or something, some kind of way we can engage with that. But go ahead, Richard.
So I have two last comments on stuff that we can do as a newspaper, as an information outlet in the wake of what is about to happen. We do have the best economy in the world right now, in spite of people thinking that because the prices of bread, milk, and eggs went up, largely due to Trump deregulation. And given the media atmosphere where we are not fighting for people's support, we are fighting against disinformation, we can better advertise into the next year. When Trump wins, it's not going to immediately change the economy. Like, you are still getting Biden's economy. To cover that in as much detail as we can and reminding people to get vaccinated, because I do not want to understress this. I truly fear that with Bobby Kennedy leading our health organizations, you might have the CDC website have at the bottom that vaccines cause autism, so you shouldn't get them. You might have lawsuits from people who are vaccine injured, or class action lawsuits by people who are vaccine injured with the support of federal groups. We might see rolling plays because, like, I had to get the measles vaccine. I had to get the polio vaccine. So telling people about the economy going into the next administration, we should need to do a story on tariffs immediately. Like, immediately have to do a story on what the tariffs will do. And definitely remind people to be vaccinated against everything. because we are entering a society where you are no longer going to be safe from some of these diseases because some people think that getting vaccinated is an infringement of their rights. I love you all, and I have to chime off so I can sign up for my retirement account. Let's hope that I'm around long enough to cash it in. I love you. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, Richard, I
Richard.
want to thank you and Jada and Micha for contributing to my retirement account. So thanks a lot for being with us.
You're welcome, and I'll talk to you all soon. Micha, I sent you the stories.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it.
So, you know, we don't know what our audience is like out there. I know it's been a great conversation for us, and we hope that folks out there. I mean, I know that James Wright, the historian, has been constantly sending information in and typing, and we're always glad to hear from him. Vince Morris, who's become a new friend of the Washington Informer, who also writes for Washington City paper, has been online watching us and thanking us for what we're doing. We so appreciate that. Anthony Tillman, Helen Wright, glad to see you all with us. And I hate to do shout outs because if I'm not giving, you know how that goes, Stacy. If you're not giving a long list of
I give it to them
names,
all the time.
you know, it's like, oh, Honey Lee is out there.
Yeah.
Mr. Rich is on fire. So thank you all for at least letting us know that you're watching. You know, this program is not only for us, sort of, you know, it's a debrief. It's a way for us to sort of focus in on the work that we need to do on the behalf of the community. And the main thing is that we need to hear from you.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to be talking about birds and you all want us to talk about bees. Now, we're still going to talk about birds, right? Because, you know, or flowers, let's put it this way, because they both go together. You need flowers in order to support the bees and vice versa. Okay, I don't know what I'm saying, but you get me, right? We want to know what's on your mind so that we can dig deep and do the work to answer the questions and to correct the information that you all are receiving from other sources, or dissect it and evaluate it so that you can understand what it means to you as a DC resident, regardless of race, as a Black person, as a white person, as a woman, as a man. You know, we want to make sure, as a younger person, as a senior, you know, these are the communities that we want to speak to. So let us hear from you, and you can reach out to us at news, NEWS, at WashingtonInformer.com. That's how you find us. Please send us any questions, any comments, any story ideas. You know, we have a home ownership called Our House newsletter. We want to know how what some of your trials and tribulations and successes are as it relates to purchasing, maintaining, or protecting your homes. Richard talked about the possible change of the population in Prince George's County. We know what's happening in the district. We need to know when and where, what's going on. So this is the way to do that. And Stacy will answer every one of your emails.
I try.
I know. So, you know, we're going to wrap up. We've been here a little bit over almost 2 hours. So this has been great. And I'm going to start with Jada. What you got for us? And as we close up.
Well, I just want to say, of course, again, thank you for having me on today. Thank you.
Jada, you know, tell them who you are. I mean, I want people to know. We keep calling you that young person, you know. we know you're pretending, but anyway, tell us who Jada is.
Well, I am the Washington Informer's Digital Equity Fellow. Long title. I know we mess it up quite often, but Digital Equity Fellow, I graduated from Howard in May. So being the Howard coverage scholar, these last couple of weeks has been great to return to my campus. But yes, I also do the newsletter for Win Daily here at the Informer, as well as copy editing and other local coverage. So throughout this time, especially, this was my first time having a very hands-on election coverage season. You know, we did midterm elections in about a couple years back at Howard, but this time being on the ground, seeing how the newsrooms are actually set up, how the news teams do it. It was really great. And it was a really great way to get involved in politics. I'm originally from Florida, so all my knowledge of politics prior to college was based over there. But now seeing how it works in the nation's capital, it makes a difference. And I really hope that despite what we all wanted the outcome to be, we can still have a little bit of optimism and continue the work that we're doing. Like Richard was saying, it's about being informative. It's about being informed on the receiving side. And a lot of the things that we're going to see happening in the next couple of months, people are worried, and they should be. But here at the Informer, we were very dedicated to making sure that everyone knows what their options are. Everyone knows what their rights are, that you can, be involved in your local elections. And that is one thing I want to emphasize. People wait until the general election to start caring about politics, but it really starts with those local elections, those local policies. And that's something that I've been able to learn since I've been here at the Informer. So I hope other people can recognize that as well and start making that difference and that change. So next election cycle, we might have a more positive outcome.
Jada, why journalism?
I've always had a passion for storytelling, and it started out with on the creative side, wanting to, just make my imagination and put it into words. But when I realized your storytelling can actually have an impact on your community and broader community, I realized that was what my passion was, making sure I can affect even the smallest bit of change by just telling the stories of people around me. So.
Wonderful. Stacy Brown, that's why I wanted her to do that, because you're that's one of the things we're finding, and Micha knows, we're finding young journalists who are passionate about this business. And it's not like, oh, well, like I was, oh, let me go get this degree because this is easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in a newspaper, I wanted to get out of college. So I said,
Right.
let's major in journalism. But the passion is there, and it has grown in me. So any closing remarks, Stacy?
Well, I'll say the same about Jada as I said about Richard. It's such a breath of fresh air. And Jada, it was just as much as my privilege to share a byline with you, as you said it was yours. So I appreciate that, and I just appreciate the work that you and Denise, Micha do here. And we are embarking on in a period that is going to be as challenging a period as we've ever encountered. And we know the state of newspapers, the state of media in general, the fight against disinformation and all that stuff. So it's going to be extremely challenging. But the Informer, as Micha said earlier, I'm encouraged because of the where the Informer is. You have done a phenomenal job of positioning the Informer to survive something like this. And with Micha in place, who is also young, regardless of what we might think, who's also young and
Dang,
intelligent and all
Stacey.
that. Well, no, we're talking about Jada and Richard and folks like that.
No, I'm joking.
Misha's not an old lady. She's experienced, but she's not an old lady. And so to have that in place, look, you couldn't get a black woman into the White House, but you certainly got the best black woman at Martin Luther King Avenue or Boulevard or whatever you call it over there. So we are fortunate with that. But you just gotta you have to we have to continue to report things that our community wants to know about and should know about. We can't worry about who's in the White House. You just can't be overly concerned about that. He's going to do what he's going to do. And I think the mistake that we can make is being paralyzed by that fear, and also abdicating our jobs as truth sayers and truth tellers. So we just got to keep doing what we do. There are plenty of other news. I'm so glad that the election is over. It didn't turn out the way most people wanted. I'm glad it's over, because now we can pay attention even more to news that people really need to know. Y'all talked about the economy. What people didn't know, um, yeah, it's eggs and prices are up, but you know what? It was a whole lot better than it was when Trump was in office the first time. we didn't feel it because we were stuck in the house for a year with the pandemic, and so we didn't really have to go anywhere and buy anything. Um, so we got to be able to tell people what's happening. I thought we did a good job on a national level covering this White House and the jobs growth all year long, and how Black unemployment was at an all-time low. And I think that's news that got lost in all of this. And
Mhm.
so instead of talking about the unhingedness of this guy and what they're, these what white supremacists are doing, we probably could have spent more time highlighting, or better highlighting, all of the positives that was going on. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
So, Stacy, before you go, it's commercial time. We air once a week on Fridays from 12 to 1. Although we do these special live broadcasts, but let it be known is a daily broadcast, Monday through Friday. Where can folks find you, and tell them a little bit more about Let It Be Known?
So we started it during the pandemic, right? And it was originally something that we used. We would have, you name the celebrity, they were on our show. Only because, again, everybody was stuck in the house, so they came out, and politicians alike. Our publishers came out as well. But nonetheless, what we try to do is bring, on a national scale, news that gets overlooked in mainstream media, that really speaks to Black folks. And we've been doing it every single day, 5 days a week, for the last 4 years or so. And you can go to Let It Be Known's YouTube page, LIBK dash news. Black Press USA. It runs on there. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Every morning, 7:30 live. But you can catch it. I know some people like to sleep, or in Denise's case, go to the gym. Um, but you can catch it later. It's, these things live. This show itself, Win TV and Let's Talk, is going to live on social media, so you can go back and watch it and run the numbers up. That helps us a lot too. Share it and do stuff like that. But that's about it. We're going to talk about things you probably won't get elsewhere.
Well, I enjoy the show, and I'm glad that we're here. We folks need alternative voices, and in our case, main voices to talk about the issues that impact our community. So I'm glad, wanted folks to know about Let It Be Known, so that they can be with you on every morning from 7:30 to 8:30 on YouTube and the other channels. Micha, any closing remarks?
I am so thankful for you all just spending this time with us and being able to kind of process where we are in the world. And so thank you to all our viewers. Continue to keep sharing this and continue to have these conversations. But in the meantime, know that as we are processing and moving forward, we're also consistently working and going and doing. And so we just ask that you guys continue to follow WashingtonInformer.com for absolutely everything. Even this conversation has my brain going in terms of planning for the future. And a lot of it is that we're trying to get the news to you all in so many different ways that is deliverable, that is digestible, that you're able to resonate with. And so we thank you for tuning in. I'm looking at some of these numbers. There's so many of you all on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube just chiming in and sharing what you find that it's important. And again, Miss Denise said, go to news@WashingtonInformer.com, where you can email us about the issues that you find important, and ensure that we are covering the community from all facets and aspects. It is really such a privilege that we get to have a little bit of a bias, which is that we want to ensure that the Black community in particular is informed, inspired, educated, empowered. And so part of that, to be able to deliver that to you all is for you all to be engaging with us and spreading the good news with us so that we can spread it to the masses. So please continue to do so. As Stacy said, we're in a great place of not just being able to focus on election coverage, which I might add, we've done a really good job of covering all aspects locally. You heard from Sam PK Collins, you heard from Richard Elliott, and you heard from Stacy, and really it's been an all hands on deck effort. But now there's so much going on that we really have been a bit distracted from because of all that's happening on the election. So I'm really excited for you all to see the rest of the news that's coming your way. We have a lot in the vault and really important community issues about hungry people, unhoused people, people who are making a huge difference in their communities through their work and activism. And that's the stuff that people have to know. And though you all, as Stacy said, we kind of got to keep on moving and not wallow in the sadness that some folks might have about the election. You do have to stay informed. And so in order to do so, keep on going to the Washington Informer.
Thanks a lot, Stacy, Jada, and Micha. I appreciate those closing words. And as you know, as I close up here on our program today, I really appreciate everybody that's joined with us. I want to echo something that I read actually last night, and it is from a nonprofit investigative journalism website called ProPublica. And it was a statement that their editor-in-chief wrote. And I'm going to read it in their words. I may replace a word, and I'll let you know when I do that. But it says I just took a piece of it because it's a very long editorial. But it says, in the 21st century, without fear or fervor means maintaining a fact-based, data-driven approach to journalism. Our job is to give readers an independent, verifiable account of what's happening, even if the president is calling us enemies of the people or bloodsuckers. At ProPublica, and we're going to adopt this here, so I'll say at the Washington Informer, our mantra, which we will echo theirs, is that we bring the receipts to every story we publish. We are journalists, not leaders of resistance. As we have done for each presidential administration since 2008, and the Washington Informer goes back to 1964, our reporters will begin with basic questions about new government policies. Who is benefiting? Who is suffering? And what are the intended consequences? That pretty much echoes our what we feel is our job and responsibility. We could add to that, and I think that we will, so that all of us at the Washington Informer are on the same page. And those of you all that are reading the Informer, following us on social media, visiting our website, subscribing to our e-newsletters, which we have several, that you will see that we are working for you. So with that, folks, we're going to sign off. We've got work to do. There's an inauguration coming up on January 20th. Stacy, we got to see if we get our tickets.
Right.
just joking there. Okay. No, but we got to cover this. We have to cover this. So we will be there. This is what we do. So anyway, folks, thank you for a great show. Thanks, folks, for watching. Tune in tomorrow at 12 noon for Let's Talk, and we'll continue the conversation then. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Where did you come to get all